Hi, it's Lucas from Avoca College, and we're just going to start by going over what is technically a fairly advanced technique, but is actually very, very simple to do once you understand how things work. So what we're going to be doing here is modelling a goblet, and we're going to start off by going to Google and finding yourself a bunch of images. So I've already done a bit of searching around Google, found some high-res images of some stuff that I would maybe like to make. I like this one here. But also maybe later on I was thinking about doing something like a pattern like this around it, which would be generally be done with normal maps. So we'll start off by using this image here. It's a nice side-on image that gives us a good outline of the actual shape of the goblet, and we'll go from there. So what you do to start off is, let's grab that image, close that one down, and we'll just grab that image and just drag it straight into Photoshop. So as far as the settings in Photoshop at the moment, I've set by going to the options menu here and just setting it to painting. That changes how all these bars on the side are set up. So if you do motion, it'll be something different. And so by setting it to painting, you should have generally the same setup as me. So you've got the swatches up here, different brush types through the middle, and your layers down the bottom. Okay, so we have that image in there now, and what we're going to do is, from that, we're going to create some blueprint type topology plan that shows us exactly where we want to lay out the vertices when we're creating the line for this model. So from the background layer, we'll add a new layer on top of that, and this is the layer that we're going to be drawing in. So if you go to the paintbrush tool, and now let's go 5 pixels should be pretty good. We want to make sure that we also have hardness set to 100. So 100 hardness is going to be really good for that, because we want a very defined line. And make sure you pick a colour that contrasts highly with the background. So on this one, we might go off fluoro green. So you see that, it stands out a lot. That line may be a little bit thick as well, so we'll just put that down to 2 pixels. Right. So what we want to do is basically draw an outline that would show where the edges would be. Like, say this cup was sliced in half, so we want to draw an outline that goes almost right through the middle of the cup. So we'll start from the inside. Let's pretend there's the inside there, so we'll do one dot there, then hold down shift and there. So what that'll do is, if you hold down shift, it'll draw a straight line from the starting position to the ending position. Now we're just going to go up and around the side of the cup, so we'll just do another hold shift again, and left click there, left click there, there, there. We'll put an extra edge there just for some of the detail. In, out, in. So just shift, left clicking the whole way down, drawing a bit of an outline. And this doesn't have to be perfect, because it is just a basic outline of the final reference that we're going to have, and then we'll click in there to finish it off. So as you can see there, we have a fairly solid outline of where the shape of that goblet, if you were to slice it in half. So the next thing that we want to do on top of that is we're going to adjust the brush size up. So let's make that something more like 10. Change the colour of it. I'll do a bright blue for this, and we just want to click on each of the corners. So this will be where we'll place our verts when we actually draw the spline for this model. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, you just want to give yourself a good reference for when you do your final model. And that's pretty much it. So we've got our outline done. This is basically what we're going to be using as our blueprint or topology plan. So we're going to save this out. So let's go File, Save As, and you want to save it into your folder structure that you've created. So you have your ICAGAM514A, your name, then this is our category 1, so it's a reference model. We don't want to save it as a PSD. Let's just change the format of that to, we'll just do a PNG, and we just want to rename this. So we just name that category 1, blueprint side, hit save. and OK. Now that we've got the image saved out as our blueprint, we can now open up Max and start setting things up in here. So this is the default scene in Max. What I'm going to do is to start off with this over here is the layers, which you can, again, you can open by clicking this button over here. So it's not really necessary for us to have this here, as it is just taking up space. So if you just click up the top there, let's drag it out. We'll just hit close and close that window. That gives us a bit more room within the scene. Every time we open up a new scene in Max, one of the first things that you really need to check is your unit setup. So if you go to the menu at the top, Customize Unit Setup, and you'll see here, at the moment it's set to generic units, so we want to use some metric units, so it actually makes sense, like rather than being just a number, we actually know if it's a centimetre or a millimetre or whatever. So I'm going to set that to metric and centimetres. And the other part of that is as well, at the moment the system unit scale is 1 unit equals 1 inch, and we want to change that to 1 unit equals 1 centimetre. All this does is changes the unit setup within the scene so that when we export it out to UDK, everything's the right size. So if you make something that's 30 centimetres high within Max, then you know it's going to be 30 centimetres high within UDK. To start off, we're going to bring our blueprint in and we're going to put that on a plane within the scene. So a plane is just a flat poly, and we'll put it on so we can use that as a reference image, so we can start drawing over the background with that. So if we just grab our images up here, so if we hit M to bring up the material editor, you can also toggle that by clicking this button over here. So this is our material editor here. What we want to do is, from our folder, we're just going to grab our blueprint and drag it and drop it into this little view one here. And we can close down that folder and get it out of the way. Now we want to create a new material, so we're just going to do a standard material. So we double click that there. Let's click and slide that off to the side. It's very cramped in the viewport here. We want to do diffuse color and select that to the bitmap. So those two are connected there. So what that does now is this material has this bitmap connected to it as a diffuse color, so that will be the main color that it's going to show. Okay, now within the front of our front viewport, click in here and create a plane. Let's just we'll change the segments of that plane to 1 and 1. Now double click on your material, make sure you have the plane selected and click assign material to selection up there. And then we also want to click show shaded material in viewport. So if I press F3 in this viewport here, I'll just press G to turn off the grid. We can see that we've got our cup showing there. But we don't have that currently set up as the right scale yet either. So we've got the material on it, so we'll get rid of that from the viewport. Just open the folder up again. Now if you right click on your material and just choose properties, it'll bring up this window here, and on the details you can see that the dimensions of that are 703 by 768. So let's move that folder out of the way and I'll move this off to the side. But this plane we want to make 703 pixels wide. We want to make it 703 wide, 768 pixels high. So just move that off and I'll use that as reference over there. So select the plane, you want to click on the Modify tab, and then the length, like it's going to be in centimetres, so it's going to be wrong, but what we're going to do is we're going to scale that down, and we just want to make sure that it is to the correct scale, like it's not stretched too wide or too high. So for the length we had 768, for the height 703, sorry, for the width 703, for the length 768. So we've got that. So now that's perfectly to scale and it's not stretched in either direction, but it is going to be wrong because it's 703 centimetres wide, which is a lot larger than our cup is going to be. So just back in the perspective viewport, right in the very middle of that, we're going to create tab, click on box, left click, drag, then release left click, and then drag up to create a box within the scene. So let's say our goblet is about 25 centimetres high. So let's set this to 25, and just to keep things nice and neat, we'll 20 for length and width as well. So now we have a box in the middle of our scene that is basically a reference of the size that our goblet is going to be. So height wise, it's a reference. With that selected, press Alt X, and what that'll do is just make it semi-transparent so you can see through it, because we want to be able to see through it as we line up this background image here. Just right click off to the side to go out of box creation mode, and with the box still selected, we go to the select and move up here. So that brings up the little gizmo for which directions that you can move the box. Down here we want to right click on the spinner wheel, and that'll set it back to 0, 0, 0. So now it's right in the middle of our scene, which is exactly where we want it. Okay, back in the front viewport, I'm going to maximise this so we can get a bit more detail and see what's going on. Press G to turn the grid off, because we don't actually need that at the moment. Now, I want to move the pivot point. So if I click over here on the hierarchy tab and affect pivot only, I'm going to move that down to right on that vert that I've drawn at the very bottom. So that is what I want to be the pivot point of the cup. So it's right on the ground, and it's right in the middle of the cup, so it slices right through the center. Now let's go back out of that mode, and we want to again right click the spinner wheels back to 0, 0. So that's lined that up at the bottom of our scene, and then we have our little box within there as well. But so now we want to get this plane, so the reference image is the right size for what we've laid out as an example of the size that we'd like the cup to be. Just going to change this to shaded mode, because the realistic can give you funny shadows sometimes. So selecting the scale tool, so you want uniform scale. There's a couple of different types of scale. Just make sure you have uniform scale, the one that looks like that. Select the plane and left click in the middle, and we're just going to scale the whole thing down until the height of the cup, so there, the height of the cup matches that box. So I'm pretty happy with that. So if I left click to select the box there, now I'm just going to right click, hide selection, because we don't need that anymore for the moment anyway. I just press G to turn the grid back on, so we can see right at the middle there is the pivot point for our cup, and that's right in the middle of the scene. If I just minimize that viewport back down, so we can see from the perspective view that we have set up cup right in the middle of the scene. Now we can start with actually drawing in some of the geometry. So, and again, back in the front view, we'll maximise that to give us a bit more space. And we want to go to the Create tab, but now we're going on to the second one here, which is Shapes. So on Shapes, we want to draw a line, and just very basic to start off with, because it doesn't need to be completely perfect. We're going to left click to start the line there, so you can see the line is following my cursor around there, and I left click out there. I can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel so I can see, and I can left click, left, left. We're just going to do that all the way till we complete the whole line. So if I'm holding the middle mouse or the mouse wheel down, you can actually pan around and move with that. So then left click all the way Okay, so we've done that, and we've moved all the way around to the very middle. So now we have a line that represents our blueprint and topology plan, and we're going to just make sure that everything lines up where it should in that. So by clicking onto the Modify tab, we can then go to Vertex mode, and by selecting Vertex mode, if you go into Select and Move, which can also be done by pressing W, you can then move around each vertex of that place, of that. So we want this one to be right in the very middle. So we can see, if you look down here, as you move it in and out, the X is actually changing. We want that X to be 0, so right click just to get that one on 0, and then we're going to do exactly the same thing with the very bottom one, right click to get that on 0, move it up and down. Then if you just go through and on each of the individual vertices, just make sure it is in a place that you would like it to be for your model. So whether it's lining up properly, or just making sure you have nice curves. So you can see this nice curve around here. I want to make sure that these two are in line. That makes a nice curve around there. It goes down to that one. And same for this one here. They all look pretty good. Just a small lip. Adjust those out. So I've created a line, we've got everything all sort of fairly well in there. Now we want to center the pivot point for the line as well. So again, like we're going to go across here onto the hierarchy tab, effect pivot only, right click the little spinner wheels to set that back to 0. So you can see our pivot point now is in the middle of the grid. Now we can probably select the plane and hide selection because we don't need that anymore because we've already created our line from that. So if you go back to the modify tab again now, and we're going to click this drop down menu, and from that we want to select Lathe. Right, and there we go. So I'll minimize that viewport again so we can look from the perspective view that we've got our goblet. It's created the cup and it's sort of gone around and put all that geometry in for us. Let's maximize that up. And that's pretty much the cup that we want. But there are a couple of other little things that do need to be adjusted with that cup. The first one is that we need to make sure that we weld the cores. So what that does is, like down here in the middle, like ticking weld core here, it'll actually weld that vertex in the middle, because otherwise you've got a whole lot of vertices coming in that aren't actually connected. So that's important to have that one there. In this case, the lathe worked in the perfect direction, but if you are doing a different type of object and it doesn't give the result that you want, you can actually see that by clicking the direction there, adjust the direction in which it lathes or turns the spline to create the object. So we want, in this case, because we made it in the front viewport, we want it on Y, which is fine there. The other important thing to turn on is generate mapping chords. So that gives us UV mapping coordinates for later on when we actually want to apply texture onto this cup. So we have our object there, and we can see that everything is sort of fairly well in place as far as where the original line was adjusted. But if by chance there was something that you didn't quite like, you wanted to move one of these vertices here, you can roll down these menus, and you can still go in and adjust the original line. So by clicking this show end result here, I can show the end result of the cup as well as have the adjustments on there at the same time. So if I wanted to go in here and it's like that lip's a bit high, I could just click that and just move that, and it will adjust the final result while still keeping my cup and everything in place. So once you've adjusted all your verts and you're happy with the general overall shape of the cup, we can do a bit of editing on top of that. So we want to go out of vert mode, close this up, go back to the top of the stack, and we're going to add onto that an edit poly. So what an edit poly is, just it's your general, like at a vert level, so you can select these parts here, move any individual part of the model that you want. So we'll just undo that one there with Control Z. But a couple of things that we can do on Edit Poly is just depending on how much detail you'd like in this model. So say this is going to be a really high poly model, and there's going to be some close-ups of it, that sort of thing. If you go into Edge mode, by double-clicking that edge, you can see it loops around the whole way. And the same if you hold Control and double-click that edge, we've selected both of those. Then in the menu over the side here, you can go across and click the chamfer menu, and that'll bring up this little menu here, which basically takes your line and splits it in two, but you can adjust how much that does. So by making that a small amount, you can make what was a fairly hard edge into a nice rounded look. So if you just click the tick box, that's completed, and that's done that there. So let's do the same again down here. So just double click on the edge, control, double click on that edge. So we've selected both the edges again. Let's bring up the little chamfer menu, turn the value of that down, click the tick box, and there we go. We've added a bunch more detail in. I might do another one of those around this bottom edge here. Okay, so now what you have also is, if you press, while you have the object selected, it's still displaying the edge faces, so I want to turn those off so I can see the smoothing groups properly, so I can get things looking much smoother and nicer. If you just left click on the realistic part, then go down to display selected, and display selected with edge faces, it's just a little bit off the edge of the screen there, but you can uncheck that. So now that I have it selected, but it isn't showing the edges, so I can see, you know, these hard edges and all this sort of stuff that I want to get rid of. So what that is, it's smoothing groups, and I'll give you a quick demonstration of how they work by going into polygon mode. So now I can select individual polygons. I just want to go into the side view and maximize that back up again. So at the moment we can see that's got a very hard edge on it, and again I need to display selected, turn that off because it is per viewport that it actually does it. So now I can go through the middle and you can see like those hard edges, like it doesn't look very good, it doesn't look very nice or very smooth. If I go through and select all those polygons there, now I'm just going to go down this menu here, and these are the smoothing groups, and how they work is any face that has the same number will smooth to the face next to it. So if I choose these two faces here and put it on 2, both those faces smooth to each other. And again, like this one over here, if I choose these two faces and press 1, they will smooth to each other, but then these two won't smooth to each other. But let's say the reason you have so many numbers down here is, let's say you want those to smooth to each other and you want those to smooth to each other, but as well you want these two. So if I select these two, you can see it sort of blanks the numbers out because they are actually, because they're different numbers at the moment. But let's say I click on the 1 and the 2, so now both of these faces know that they'll smooth to 1 and 2. So if I unselect that, you can see these two faces are smoothing to each other, but these two aren't, and these two are. What I usually like to do, change that back to the straight on front. What I usually like to do to get the smoothing groups right is select everything that I want to be in the same smoothing group. Like I want that whole area to smooth over to each other. Make sure that this value here is high enough that it's so this value is how sharp the edge needs to be before it breaks the smoothing group. So if this is very low, like let's go 1, and I hit auto smooth, you can see they're all still very fragmented. Whereas if I put it up much higher, like 60, and hit auto smooth, because none of those faces are more than 60 degrees, it then does a smooth across the whole area. So that's what I wanted for that little part there. I might do the same for the top part of the goblet as well. So I'm just going to hit auto smooth there, and that's smoothed out the whole thing. I like those little ridges in there. This part down the bottom I think could probably do with there, that's smoothed over. I might do that whole section there, auto smooth. Let's go back to the perspective viewport, so we can then see now with the smoothing groups and everything set up for those, it helps it smooth from certain faces onto other faces. One of the last things that I wanted to show was when we were setting up the original lathe and we clicked generate mapping chords, I just wanted to show the reason why we checked that on and what that actually does. So I'm just going to create a quick material by just pressing M and bringing up the material editor. Just expand this out so you can see a bit better. Let's double click that to create a new standard material. Then I'm going to left click on the diffuse and just drag it to the middle of nowhere. I'll drop that and I'll choose a checker pattern. So if you double click the checker pattern, you can then come over here and you can adjust the tiling of it. I'm going to set that to 10 and 10. Okay, now I want to show this material shaded in the viewport, so I'll just double click on the standard material, click that one again. Now if I just move that down a bit out of the way, select the cup, the goblet, and click on the assign material to selection. So you can see you have the checker pattern on the cup there, and when you get more complex shapes it can cause a bit of stretching, but at least you have that UV mapping already on there. So if I go across here, and I can close the material editor now, and if I go back down to the lathe, so it's going to give you this warning because you've done modifications on top of it, but in this case we can just click hold and yes, and in the lathe down the bottom here where we clicked generate mapping chords, if you uncheck that, you can see it doesn't actually know how to apply the material onto it, or the coordinates to apply the material onto it. So you end up with a bit of a blank cup, and then if you try to map another image onto it, it won't work unless you add on UV coordinates. So by checking this button, we make sure that we have generated some UV mapping coordinates, and it gives us that look so it knows where to assign the textures. So that's how we do a basic model of a goblet, and we'll get into texturing it and finishing it off a bit later.